welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. While you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. You can sign up for an academy or 12 academies. You know, you can sign up for academies, fill the rest of your year up with learning things over at the 1517 Academy. Read some articles, sign up for some events, whatever you want to do. And then, of course, you can go to the donate page and become a contributor to keep helping us do this stuff. I mean, all this stuff is free. How are you going to sign up for free academies? How are you going to do it? Well, it's only possible because people like you are contributing to the cause, and thank you very much to those of you who already do that. Chad, we are in Isaiah chapter 13. We ended up on a real bummer, and I don't know that it's going to get better soon because we ended in the middle of a bummer, not the end of a bummer. And so we have Isaiah getting a little poetic, I don't know if he's singing a song, reciting. This writing is not simply prophetic, but also he's using more colorful and flowery language than that. And we're talking about here about the judgment of Babylon. And so what this is going to look like, and ended with, faces being set aflame, and, I mean, it's rough. He is going to have infants dashed to pieces, and houses plundered, and wives ravished. So not real positive stuff.
No, pretty brutal ending for sure. And like you said, it's not going to get much better. Although, don't stop listening. We do have a little bit of a break from the doom and gloom when we get to the beginning of chapter 14, at least 2 verses of light in the midst of the doom and gloom. So we do have that going for us anyway. But we got to finish off this oracle against Babylon. Yeah, that we're about 16 verses into. We'll pick it up with verse 17 and see where Isaiah goes from there. So I think I'm going to just go ahead and read 17 through 22. That'll end the chapter for us. Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them, who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes will not pity children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the splendor and pomp of the Chaldeans, will be like, and we know what's coming after this, it's like the standard comparison, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. It will, that is Babylon, it will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. No Arab will pitch his tent there. No shepherds will make their flocks lie down there. But wild animals will lie down there, and their houses will be full of howling creatures. Their ostriches will dwell, or some kind of animal. All these animals were half the time when you get down to like more exotic animals in the Hebrew, half the time it could be this, it could be that. You're sort of guessing. So
a lot of ostriches running around that part of the world.
Yeah, ghost towns. There's a lot of ostriches. Judean ghost towns, a lot of ostriches. So ostriches, or owls, or at least some kind of birds, will dwell, and their wild goats will dance. So there's some pretty good chance that we have a kind of a mixture here of real animals and mythological creatures. So the Hebrew here is sa'ir, which is can also be translated as a satyr, like a male goat demon dancing around. So maybe you have a mixture here of animals and mythological creatures, but however you want to translate that. ESV has the wild goats will dance. Hyenas, that's one possible translation. Could also be foxes or even jackals, even though you have jackals in the very next half verse. Hyenas will cry in its towers and jackals in the pleasant palaces. Its time is close at hand, and its days will not be prolonged. So before we get into the details, the overall message is pretty clear. Babylon's days are numbered, even though there's a lot of speculation when you read the literature as to exactly when this is going to happen. I think it's best when we're dealing with oracles like this not to treat it as if it's kind of a weather forecast. What's going to happen in 8 days? Well, exactly this. The prophets, when they're talking about the future, are not most of the time concerned with pinpointing an exact day or month or even year when something's going to happen. They're looking into the future, and God is giving them a vision of the future. But oftentimes the fulfillment of this isn't necessarily a pinpoint on the calendar. Rather, it's a process. This is going to happen, which leads to this, which leads to this. I mean, we know, for instance, that the Assyrians wiped out Babylon, but then later on, or early on, like right around this time. And then later on, you had, of course, the Persians, and Babylon was, rather than like having a decisive fall, it was more of a gradual crumbling to where it is what it is today. It just ruins. But anyway, that's the overall message, of course, that it's going to have this decline, and then it's eventually going to become nothing more than a ghost town, which is exactly how we have it described here at the end, where you're looking around, and there's not even like some Bedouin tribe or some shepherds that have their animals there, like they might, in some deserted city. They're not even going to be there. The only things there are these wild creatures or mythological creatures who are roaming through the ruins. You got these hyenas up in the city towers that are howling at night, jackals running around all over the place. So it's the reverse, more or less. This place, which was the height of pomp and circumstance and power and arrogance, and everybody looked up to Babylon. Well, now everyone's going to look down to Babylon because it's going to be nothing more than a ruined city. So that's clearly the overall message of the chapters. There's some details that we can get to, but at least that much is clear.
Yeah, one of the things that, it's obviously painting a picture of like a place that is left in desolation. It paints that picture pretty good. It doesn't, you don't have to imagine much. It's all right there. One of the things I have to always remember, I don't know if I'm the only one that has to do this, because whenever I'm like reading, it's probably because of movies and stuff, man. So if you watch like movies about, not this time usually, but maybe you've like watched some movies about, like you've watched like Troy or something like that, and you get this idea in your head of like massive cities and all this kind of stuff, and you got to kind of dispel a little bit of that, where like these places are not cities the way that like maybe like a medieval battle movie might portray that. like these, if you were to go visit some of these places, you're like, oh, that is not as big as I thought it was. And you have to understand that like just people groups were smaller, and cities were smaller. They didn't have the ability to build a lot of the things that we would think of now. And so there is this desolation. That's why some of this stuff can happen. It can happen very quickly. Like your city walls get busted down, and like it's all over.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and once the walls are down, everything's over.
Yeah.
So once the walls are down, of course, that's the gates and your walls. That's your only defense. You bring those down, and the armies going in. The very reason you're hiding behind the city walls is because that is, instead of like marching out to attack, is because you know that if you march onto the field with these guys, you're going to lose. So yeah, if the walls come down, then everything else is going to be coming down with it. So just a couple of details here that we can point out. First of all, it is kind of strange the way he begins. So back in verse 17, he says, "I'm stirring up the Medes against them, who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold." You would expect this to be the Persians, because it's ultimately the Persians who take down the Babylonian Empire. But the Medes were part of the coalition, so maybe they were more fierce. Maybe that's the reason that they come up here. But back in 539, when you have the overthrow of Babylon under the Persians, the larger coalition of those Persian forces, were inclusive of the Medes. And that kind of fits with the way they're described. They have no regard for silver, do not delight in gold. That's not saying they don't care about silver and gold. It's saying they can't be bought off, which is, I mean, one of the things that would have happened back in the ancient world, not just ancient world, I mean, up into through medieval times too. I mean, if a city had the option of basically paying tribute, silver and gold, and their city would be preserved, well, that's what they would have done. So these guys are like, nope, we're not going to be bought off. No regard for silver, no delight in gold. We're out for blood. And then
the freakiest army is the army that you're like, hey, what are they here for? Are they here to take all our stuff? Maybe we could just give it to them. You're like, oh no, they don't care about your stuff. They're here to kill you. Like that's all that they're going to take your stuff, to be sure. But it's not the motivation. So like once the motivation is not those things, you're like, oh well, we're in big trouble here.
Oh yeah, then it's over. I mean, even Genghis Khan, who was like one of the more unmerciful conquerors of the world, even he could be bought off. I mean, if a city willingly surrendered, they were going to pay dearly monetarily, but they weren't going to be destroyed. Well, these guys are not in it for the money. And then a couple of the details. It is kind of, we have a odd use of the Hebrew here, but I think it makes sense in the context. So verse 18 says, their bows will slaughter the young men. The ESV and probably other translations too have a footnote here that says the Hebrew means to dash in pieces. I mean, that is the meaning of that verb everywhere. So, bows don't dash people in pieces. They pierce them through, they kill them, they slaughter them, which is what ESV has here. But I think the reason that this odd expression is used is because of what we hinted at as we started this episode. If you go back to verse 16, it says their infants will be dashed in pieces. And that's the same verb that's used here. So I think it's simply repeated for the sake of the context. So there's going to be a widespread destruction of everyone and everything. Let's see. I don't know that there's anything else I need to point out there. Anything else that catches your eye we need to discuss?
No, I think it paints a pretty explicit picture.
Pretty clear. All right. Well, that takes us through this oracle against Babylon. And keep in mind, as I think we talked about last episode, that Babylon is front and center in all of these oracles against the nations, which we're going to be covering in these next few chapters of Isaiah, because of its rising prominence. At this time, when Isaiah is writing this, it's on the rise. It wants to be on the rise, but it's not there yet. It's not the top dog. It's not the international power of Isaiah's day. That's going to be the Assyrians, but it will become that. And then also because it harkens all the way back to Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel. So Babylon becomes, in the big picture of the Bible, from Genesis and then, of course, to the horror of Babylon in Revelation, Babylon is the icon of the ungodly, worldly power that represents kind of the human element, or the human tool, we might even say, that the dark forces of evil are using in this world. And so when you have the downfall of Babylon, it's not just the downfall of a city or a nation or a king, it's a downfall of evil. So anytime the destruction of Babylon is being talked about, you're also hearing about the destruction. It's also kind of a precursor of that final day of the Lord, which is to come. All right, so chapter 14, got a couple of good verses here, some hope. For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, and will again choose Israel, and will set them in their own land, and sojourners will join them, and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves. They will take captive those who were their captors, and rule over those who oppress them. And those two verses are the light that we've been talking about that we're going to see. So this is a kind of a brief respite from the oracles against the nations that we're going to see. And this is, of course, something we've already heard from Isaiah, and it's going to be something that we hear from him over and over in the chapters that at least follow these oracles against the nations. And basically, the message is that there's going to be a reversal. So Judah, Israel, they're going to be exiled. They're going to go into captivity. They're going to suffer because of their rebellion against God. But what's God going to do? Well, he's going to have compassion. Every time I see this word in the Old Testament, I just kind of pause because it does have such a, I don't even know what the word to describe. It's like this deep emotional, almost a kind of a maternal feel to it, because the word that's used here, the root of this word for compassion, is the same root for a woman's womb. So kind of, you think of a woman and the love that she showers upon her child, this womb-like love and concern. Well, that's always at the base of God's compassion. So the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and again choose Israel. In other words, the exile is not going to be forever. He's going to bring them back because he's a good, gracious, ready to forgive, long-suffering God. He's going to bring them back. He's going to get them back to their own land, he says. But he's not just going to bring them back and settle them in their land. He's not just going to restore them, but he's also going to expand them. Because we hear about three different groups, three different non-Israelite groups. First of all, you have the sojourners. And Israel always had sojourners who were living among them. People who were not Israelites, but who came to live, and in many cases, to become part of the people of Israel. So Gentiles are going to join with them and attach themselves to the house of Jacob. So Jews and Gentiles are going to be living together and worshiping together. And not only that, but verse 2 says that God is going to use the peoples, so more Gentiles, to bring the Israelites back home, back to their place. And those who had taken them captive are going to become their captors, going to become their servants, going to become their slaves, and they're going to rule over those who oppress them. Now, this kind of language we're going to hear multiple times, beginning with Isaiah 45. You hear this in Isaiah 49, where, for instance, this is Isaiah 45, talking about the enemies of Israel. They shall come over in chains and bow down to you, and they will plead with you, saying, surely God is with you, is in you, and there is no other, no God besides. And you have that language repeated elsewhere. And we heard this back in chapter 2, where the word of the Lord is going to go forth from Mount Zion, and the Gentiles are going to hear, and they're going to say, come, let us go up to the house of the Lord, to the dwelling place of the God of Jacob. This is Isaiah's way of basically talking about the expansion of the church. I mean, to kind of put it in explicitly Christian terms. So this never happened, by the way. So if you think maybe this was fulfilled, like when the Jews came back from Babylon or something like that, no, this never happened. This is, if anything, you had a very tiny sort of miniature fulfillment of it, but nothing like this ever happened after the Babylonian exile, because it was waiting to be fulfilled when finally Christ established his kingdom, his church, and you have the expansion of that church to include not only Jews, but also multitudes of Gentiles. And thus, Isaiah 14, 1 and 2, that's looking forward to what's eventually going to come when the servant comes, establishes the kingdom, and destroys the dividing wall between Jew and Gentile.
Yeah, I mean, as you talk about this remnant thing, one of the things that's interesting about this is that 14 starts with the word for. And so you're like, oh, that's weird. Because you just got done. So if you didn't have a chapter break here, you have like, oh, let me describe all this destruction. And then you have for, the Lord will have compassion on Jacob. And you're like, okay, so here's all this destruction, talking about Babylon. And why is all that happening? Well, it's because the Lord will have compassion on Jacob. That's what it is. And again, we'll choose Israel, right? So the whole reason that this is being allowed to happen is because of his compassion in choosing.
Yeah, there's always a double side to this. I mean, we see this going back to the book of Exodus. You have the Egyptians destroyed and the Israelites saved. So the moment of judgment becomes also the moment of salvation.
Yeah.
Over and over in the Old Testament. I mean, that ultimately that leads to the cross itself. Yeah, the moment of judgment becomes the moment of salvation for all of us.
Yeah, and if you're talking about like a remnant here, the whole point of a remnant is to keep the promise alive, right? To keep the promise going, and so since that's what a remnant is, and that's what God is doing here, He's ultimately, preserving a remnant, not because there's like this little small group of people that were righteous or whatever, but because He made a promise that's going to come through this people, and He's going to get to Christ one way or another, like through all this judgment and destruction. And then in Christ, now you'll have the expansion of Israel, which will be Gentiles and the church and everything.
Yeah, everything that we see happening in the book of Acts, and then all, of course, through the letters of Paul, and of course, still today. Yeah,
in a lot of ways, like a part of the fulfillment of this is what happens at Pentecost, like where like you got the remnant going down, like with these 12 guys, 11 guys, and there's other people obviously, but it's small. I mean, like the remnant has gotten really little, and then in just one day, it's like, well, I'm gonna add 3,000 whoever's, like people that speak all, and the reason you know this is because you're talking about what is speaking in tongues when they go out and preach. Well, they're speaking in all these different languages, and so you know that they're preaching to like people from all over the place, and 3,000 people are added to the church, right? And those people are not all Jews, because otherwise this tongues thing would not have been necessary. You could just use one language. And so if you're looking for like, hey, when did this happen though? Like when did it happen? Well, certainly part of it, or the initial thing, part of it happened at Pentecost. You get this exact thing happening.
Yeah, and keep in mind that at Pentecost, there were a lot of people in Jerusalem because it was Pentecost. People came there to celebrate the feast. They would travel from a lot of other places to go there, and there would have been people, of course, just living there. So a lot of the people who became believers that day, they didn't stay in Jerusalem; they went back home. So as they went back home, what they take with them? Well, they take them pretty cool stories. This is what happened, and this is the gospel. So you have an immediate expansion because of those people going back to where their homelands were, in order to spread the good news. I mean, keep in mind, even in the book of Acts, you got people believing all the way down in Ethiopia. You got the eunuch who's heading back home, and he not being a Jew, and he's reading the prophet Isaiah. So he took that good news back, and that same thing would happen to these other people too. And so the news begins to spread slowly, to be sure, but broadly. And then you see, of course, the eventual expansion of the church all over the Greco-Roman world.
Yeah.
All right. So you ready to do some taunting of Babylon? That's what's coming up next. So
God's not above being a little petty sometimes, is He?
Yeah, you got a taunt coming up here. So verse 3 kind of introduces this with this word, this verse. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. So we have earlier in the Old Testament, like in the times of David and Solomon, the idea that God had given his people rest. But bear in mind, this was not only a limited rest, but it also was a pretty small area of rest. This was not something which was worldwide. This was not something which lasted for a long time. But sure, God gave them rest in the sense of during David and Solomon's reign, they didn't have nearly as many enemies to contend with because God had given them victory against those enemies. But that was just a foretaste of what was to come. So he's going to give you a great and abiding rest from your pain, from your turmoil, from your hard service with which you were made to serve. I checked the Hebrew there, and those two words for hard service, exact same phrase that's used all the way back in Exodus 1, verse 14, talking about the hard service that the Israelites endured when they were in Egypt, the bitterness of life that they experienced there. So we're going to have this taunt against the king of Babylon. The word used for taunt there is, it's kind of I guess you could say it's a translation. It's kind of one of these combination translation interpretations. The word is mashal in Hebrew, that can describe a proverb or a parable or a wisdom saying or a poem. Now, if you look at what follows, then it's sort of a lament but it's turned on its head. So it's not a lament where you're grieving something, but it's a lament in which it's almost schadenfreude. It's like almost rejoicing over this bad stuff that's gonna happen. So it's an upside down lament in that you're rejoicing with God over the downfall of those who perpetrated evil against the people of God, and primarily against those who engage in a sort of a mission of self-deification, lifting up themselves to be equal with God. So taunt's a good translation of that when you look at it in context. So how does a taunt go? Well, here's how we begin. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers, that struck the people in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. Even the trees are singing. The cypresses rejoice at you. The cedars of Lebanon saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. I'm just going to pause there for a minute. So this is I keep this in mind. So this is my reading of this whole taunt. I think you got to hear it on a couple of different levels. So number one, this isn't necessarily against like any specific king of Babylon. This is against the kingdom of Babylon and kind of a composite of all of the arrogant rulers who were over the kingdom of Babylon. So there is part of what's going on here is definitely a taunt against the earthly kingdom of Babylon and her rulers. No doubt about it. At the same time, you got to think about the demonic forces, the dark forces of evil that are behind these kinds of kingdoms, these kinds of rulers. Because I think at the same time you got that going on. It's sort of a double sermon that's happening with this taunt against the king of Babylon. Because what is going to be described with reference to the arrogance of Babylon applies just as much to the arrogance of evil forces, which also are going to be, as we'll hear in a second, driven down to Sheol. So you got kind of twin messages happening here at the same time.
Yeah, kind of the big part of this taunt is, you can, of course, yes, as you said, like you're talking about a kingdom, so the way that one country might taunt another country, and it's not specific to whoever happens to be the prime minister or president or dictator of that country. It does include him, but it's much more than that, right? It's the whole idea of that place. Yeah. And then of course, you're God. Whenever God's like taunting the wicked, he's certainly taunting the devil, which is part of what he's doing. And this taunt kind of goes like, man, it got quiet around here. What happened? Why does all this stuff cease? What's going on? Like it got really. You could hear a pin dropping over here. Like that is the taunt.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. No more axes. No more chainsaws going on.
Where are you guys at?
Yeah, even the cypresses and our favorites, the cedars of Lebanon, they're happy. since you were taken down, man, there's no more chopping down of our trees. Got really quiet here in the woods. Yeah, everybody's happy. There's rest. There's quiet. It's breaking forth into singing.
And even the grave's excited, though. I mean, the grave's excited about it.
Yeah, we're getting to some great stuff coming up here. So, if you're eating right now, you might want to set that bowl of cereal aside just for a minute, especially when I get to verse 11. So let me read 9 through 11. So Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shades to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, literally in Hebrew, that's all those who were the rams of the earth. This is a metaphorical use of animals here to describe those who are the leaders. So the ram-like leaders of the earth. And the shades that greet you that occurs quite a few times. Rephaim in the Hebrew, it's just a description of the spirits or the souls, or however you want to, the shadowy ones who are down there in Sheol. So all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. And see if this great crowd in Sheol. And what are they going to do? All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. So I was talking to my wife, Stacy, about this morning, telling her what was coming up, what we were going to be describing. Yeah, I got that yuck look from her when I quoted that, the end of verse 11. Yeah, you know what your bed's going to be? Maggots. And your bedspread, worms. That's where you're heading.
Don't you get the impression that there's this sort of what happens with all of these kingdoms is they overthrow each other, and like one rises up and like I'm the power now, and so like I beat up you guys and take over your stuff, and then somebody else rises up and they go and return the favor and all this kind of thing. And of course they all end up in the same place, which is the grave. And you almost have like it feels like the rulers of the people that Babylon had overthrown to become what it was are like, oh, looks like you became like us. Like, come on down here. Been waiting for you.
Yeah.
Like, so like these are all. Maybe that's not exactly it, but that's how I hear it. Is just like these the people that you previously sent to Sheol are waiting for your arrival, and they're like, yes, you too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. This is the greeting party is those that you have overthrown or belittled or killed or whatever it might be. And their basic message is, now you see that Sheol has democratized us all. Yeah, you who were so powerful, where's that? Where are those harps and all of the stuff that you used to have?
All that pomp.
All that pomp and circumstance has gone away, and now here you are, as weak and as powerless and as lowly and as dead as we are. There's your bed where those worms are, and pull some maggots are, and pull some worms over you if you get a little bit chilly down here in Sheol. So yeah, pretty unforgettable poetry. But he's not done. I mean, we're barely going to get rolling into this taunt. It's going to get even better here. So let me read 12 and I don't know, maybe 12 through 15. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. There's a lot of details we got to get back to in a second, but I'm just going to read through 15. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. So we start out here with a lot of people are going to be familiar with this language of how you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the dawn. So this is where we get our title for the devil is Lucifer. So it's kind of a long and complicated history, but basically what it is you have, in Hebrew it's Halel ben Shahar, which is translated here, O day star, son of dawn. Now that came into Greek in the Septuagint as the translation as dawn bringer. And then that got brought into the Latin Vulgate by Jerome as Luciferos, Lucifer, because Lucifer just means one who brings light. And it's connected also with Venus, which is the morning star. So this is that's at least the way we got the name itself. Now, there's probably some Canaanite mythology that's behind some of this that Isaiah is utilizing and echoing without embracing, because you have this idea in some of the surviving literature from Canaanite sources where you have this exaltation of certain gods who are then brought low. So that's possibly being echoed here by Isaiah. But the main message is he's talking about the king of Babylon. And he's also talking about, of course, at the same time, the devil.
Well, the god of the Babylonians is who knows what, except for the fact that we do know it's the devil. So whatever it is, it's the devil.
Whatever it is, yeah. Very, very true. Yeah. So he's cut down, laid low. You who laid the nations low. And here we have this speech within his heart in which he says, I'm going to ascend to heaven. I'm going to go above the stars of God. I'm going to set my throne on high. I'm going to sit on the mount of assembly. Now I would translate this next phrase, instead of in the far reaches of the north, quite literally on the heights of Zaphon. Zaphon was the mountain. It was kind of the Canaanite equivalent of Mount Olympus, because that's where they believed that their gods dwelt. So he says, I'm going to sit up there on the heights of this divine abode of the gods. Now this matches, of course, human arrogance, but it also matches demonic arrogance, we might say. It's got both these going on at the same time. So you said, this is what you're going to do. And now what's really going to happen to you? Well, you're going to be brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. So in Hebrew, it's the same. He says, I'm going to sit in the far reaches of the north, or the far reaches of Mount Zaphon, and you're going to be brought down to the far reaches of the pit. So in just these, 4 or 5 verses, Isaiah has perfectly captured the human and the demonic arrogance of those who refuse to accept with gratitude and humility the created gift of being who they are. Whether that's an angel or whether that's a person, the reason God made us who we are is because that's what is best for us. But then you have this arrogant uplifting of this desire to be like God or like the gods. And so what happens to you? Well, the same thing that always happens. God brings low. In this case, brings them all the way down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Yeah,
I have to do a study on this and see if this is the case, but I feel like this is the case. It seems like every time when God says, you said in your heart, it's never, ever something good. Is there a time in Scripture where it says, the phrase, he or they or you said in your heart, it is followed by something like righteous or virtuous? It seems like, again, I'd have to do a study on this, but I can't think of any time that you are, whatever follows that is about to be something terrible.
Yeah. Well, if there are exceptions, that's exactly what they are. They're exceptions, because the rule is when someone says something in their heart, then it's not good. I know that's Jeroboam said in his heart, if I don't build these golden calves, then I'm going to lose my people. So, yeah, the speaking in the heart is the entry point to wicked speech or evil plans or whatever it might be.
Almost always like idolatry, right? Like it's always like, and I said in my heart, I will be God. That seems like it's even if it's not that explicit, it's like some version of that, which goes to the biblical idea that the heart is deceitfully wicked. So when you're saying things in your heart, they're probably wicked things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, are we halfway through? A little over halfway through the taunt. We're at our 40-minute mark, but yeah, that's you're kind of getting into Isaiah's style, his message here, this taunt against the king of Babylon and the devil. And I mean, it's bad news on the one hand. It's certainly bad news for them, but at the same time, keep in mind, this is all good news for us, because the overthrow of dark forces and evil is at the same time the uplifting of the people of God.
Yep.
So this is the good news of our victory in Christ's resurrection victory over all the forces of evil.
That's right. All right. Well, we will come back next episode and finish up the taunt and then see what Isaiah has for us next. Chad, I'll see you then.
See you then.